Cosm family, Cosm family. I'm just so honored to be able to serve in this capacity. And, you know, when you've been meditating for 25 years, you kind of wonder where it's all going and for what, particularly in education. And I feel like we are making history in forming a coalition of schools, educate mindfully. We are absolutely creating history because we are bringing to the forefront the importance of this work for us and by us, and how when we do our own healing work, we come into a space differently and we serve differently. Just in a short amount of time, because of our heart connection to each other, I've made fabulous new Cosm colleagues that I know are soon becoming friends. There's Sally, there's Grace, there's Barnaby, there's Mimi, there's James, there's Megan, there's Hector, there's Matt, there's Lauren. And I am just so excited to make more new friends, more new colleagues that are so aligned to the purpose of this work. I really want to stress to you all the importance of this being a healing space. And I'm probably going to say some things that are going to make people really uncomfortable. No, really uncomfortable. And I am really just inviting us to suspend all of the stuff that we bring. Oh, we're professional, we're like this is rote. We are in a learning space. We are in a learning space, but we're also in a receiving space. And the more that I've worked around equity, mindfulness, social emotional learning, and bringing it to spaces that are mostly white, I have to honestly say that we have to abandon some of the intellect and we have to increase the emotional rigor. Because teachers and educators are, I believe, the most brilliant people. No profession is created without ours. But we are so brilliant, and that brilliance will overshadow, we will over-intellectualize what we know to be true and intuitively true. And it will override our level of caring. One of the other reasons that this work is so important to me is that in our country, the majority of our teachers are white women. And so how powerful is it that we show up to do this work and show up to do it compassionately, and that is simply the audience, because our kids are not mostly white women. And so if we have this cultural disconnect, we have to look to heal the cultural disconnect. And we can't blame children for that. We are doing the most sacred work there is, creating the future of humanity. That is what we do. That is what we do as educators. And even transformation can happen so quickly. Where's Marie? I talked to Marie this morning. Where's Marie? There's Marie. Marie was in our whiteness workshop yesterday with Sally and Grace. We talked about the video that we made in the Cosm Equity series that we started. And we talked about having racial healing allies. Marie watched the video yesterday. She's like, I don't even know how I found the video because I can remember the link. She's already secured her ally. She was so inspired that she's already secured her ally. So even though some things are going to get uncomfortable, remember to anchor to the power of your breath. Throughout this entire conference, throughout our session together, stay present and mindful enough to anchor to what we know is our true source of power in being mindful, which is the breath. Hit your partner sometimes who's sitting next to you. Breathe. Okay, because things are going to get shallow. If we get anxious, our breathing will land in our chest and it will be shallow. Shallow breathing does not heal or activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's what belly breathing does. The invitation is that you embrace liminal space. Embrace a sense of the openness. Consider what you already knew to be the end. Because liminal space is the space where we're going to float together in the infinite possibility of unknowing. Unknowing. And so after you're hanging out in unknowing and allowing yourself to be poured into these next few days, let that be your new beginning. Set a new intention for your learning. Set a new intention for your growth. Suspend everything else. And again, the invitation that Tracy and I and the entire coalition membership are extending to us is to choose to heal. And healing is really great, but it's really painful at the exact same time. And the healing's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen just this weekend. But by hanging out in that liminal space, you get to choose again and see what bubbles up. So we're going to deep dive. We're going for it. Okay, I've laid a little bit of groundwork. We're going to keep going. That is me in kindergarten. And that is me with my mother at 8th grade promotion ceremony. And that was the last time that my mother would see me have an academic achievement, was in 8th grade. And my mother was the type of mother who totally valued school. She was a single mother, a nurse, so she went to trade school, didn't go to college. She was from New York. She was a Virgo, raising a Pisces. So I know how to make a mean list, let me tell you. And she just really loved me, and she wanted the absolute best for me. And when I came home after school, it was always about sit down and get your homework done. Now I'm going to check your homework. Oh, that's not good enough. That's not neat enough. So things had to be right. There was an expectation of excellence that was poured into me. Even though we were taking the buses to get to school, even though sometimes I was on the back of her 10-speed bicycle to get to school. Okay? There were things that we didn't have, but I had my mother's belief and I had my mother's love. I'm going through, cruising through life, everything is good. When I was 14 years old, a news broadcast came on, 1986. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment with my mother in Newport Beach, which is Southern California, beach area, and it's pretty privileged and very white. And on the news, there's this broadcast about this major virus that has hit the scene, and how terrible this virus is, and how it's attacking the gay white male community. And that people are afraid of it, they don't know how it's spread and how terrible it is, and then the amount of shaming that accompanied this disease. And we're really susceptible to media as young people. And I immediately started chastising what I was seeing, collaborating in chastising what I was seeing with what I was hearing from the news. And my mother turned off the TV, and she says, "Toby, I'm a nurse. I'm also a single mom." And she says, "I need you to know that you can't chastise people like this. You can't chastise people for having this terrible disease." And she says, "Because I have the disease." And at that moment, I learned that my mother was dying of AIDS. And in that moment, I knew that things were going to be different. It was then that my mother started having me type to colleges. There was no internet. I was looking through a book, and I'm typing letters to Spelman College. I'm typing letters to Howard. I'm typing letters to UC Berkeley. Because my mother had to know that no matter what, I was going to know how to be successful. She had college in store for me. She had plans in store for me. And she felt like she had a speediness of preparation that needed to happen so that I wouldn't have to rely on a system that she couldn't trust, a system that she didn't trust to do right by me as her black little girl. We moved because my mother could no longer work. My mother moved away from me for a few weeks, and she lived in a one-bedroom studio above a garage outside of Crystal Cathedral. And she loved that little one-bedroom garage because Crystal Cathedral, if you remember back in the day when they would show it, had this beautiful, huge white cross at night that would just light up the sky. And that gave her such comfort. My mother's brother was very successful and wealthy and lived in Pasadena, which is a suburb in Southern California. And he came to visit her, and he said, I can't let you come here, live away from Toby, and just come and be alone to die. And so he moved her into his 3-bedroom townhouse, where she then came and got me. When I say came and got me, and I say away from my mother, I was 14, 13 years old at that time. I honestly do not remember where I was for 2 to 3 weeks out of my life. At a time where I'm remembering so much of this, I do not remember where I was. That's what trauma will do. Okay, that's how our bodies and brains will also protect us. Not really major to be living away from your mother for 3 weeks, but apparently something was major enough emotionally, and feeling that sense of what it will be next, where will the abandonment be. So my mother, loving and valuing my education, sends me to a private all-girls school. I have no idea how she got me in here. I'm picturing a scene from like Forrest Gump. I have no idea how she got me in here. And she's using her entire disability check to pay for my tuition. And my uncle says, go ahead and do that, and I can pay for everything else. So there I am, putting on a uniform every day, and I'm on the bus going to this private school every day with the maids, because we're leaving the less privileged area, moving into the very privileged area, because this private school is in an old mansion by the Rose Bowl. And so there I am, in my private school uniform on the bus with all the Latina women, and we're just driving in on the bus. And the houses get more and more beautiful as we go. One day, one morning, my uncle knocks on my door at 5 a.m. And I knew what that door knock at 5 a.m. was going to mean. And he walked in and he told me that my mother had passed away. She had spent about a week in intensive care. And she passed away, and I just remember saying to him, okay, thank you. And waited for him to close my door. He closes my door. I don't remember my entire thought process, but I remember that there I was, putting on my saddle shoes, putting on my ruffled socks, in my skirt, in my uniform, and I come downstairs, and he looks at me, and he says, what are you doing? And I said, I need today to be normal. I need to go to school. School is what our kids often value. It is often the place that feels most normal to them in a world that can be challenging and not normal. That's the power that we have to hold a container of care and of love and rigor and empowerment in our schools. But we have to heal to make that happen. We have to heal to make that possible. And when the adults heal in a system and when we give, this is what happens. It happens. It all comes together and it all makes sense of why we do what we do. And the other flip side of it is that, you know what? We can do better. Because we're still not doing right by a lot of the kids that don't look like the people in this room. Here's a video for us. Feel free to get up if you need to, move in a little bit if you need to see better. That list that we saw was just a fraction of the hundreds of Post-its that I've collected from teachers. That list of educational trauma was made by teachers. That was just literally a handful and not even the worst. Our educational system is a microcosm of our larger society. And so if we're not addressing what's happening in society and even doing better in a system that's creating the future of our society, we have educational trauma that then becomes other types of trauma. And we end up working our stuff out on little kids. James Butler had a nice piece in his chapter in the book where he was able to be aware enough about how he was being impatient with his students. And that he knew that his level of impatience wasn't about them, it was about him. And that he had to work on whatever he needed to work on to then become more patient to show up in his classroom, to show up for those that he is serving. That's when we take responsibility for our healing. That's when we take responsibility to not re-traumatize others. When we talk about other aspects of educational trauma, a lot of it is othering. Our LGBTQ population, the statistics of that are devastating. That's societal biases, societal beliefs, familial biases, familial beliefs playing out in an education system. And on top of that, the huge disconnect around culture and race. The data on the brilliance of Black children exists, but that is not the data that we show. But we can read off tons of disaggregated data that shows how poorly African American children are performing. We have to own our systemic whiteness in our societal culture that's then impacting the educational culture. It takes social emotional learning to do this. It takes this level of personal growth and professional growth. That's educational trauma. Colonization, assimilation, be like us. Those young children could have learned just like they were, but apparently they had to look different just to be able to access learning. New wave of trauma. We're repeating ourselves hundreds of years later. We're in here right now. There are kids in cages right now. We're in here. This new wave of trauma, they're not going to go into like a healing center before they come into our classrooms. We don't work like that. They're going to come into our classrooms. And I don't mean they in a derogatory way. I mean these harmed children. What are we going to do? What will we think? More important question is, how will I be? How will I be? That is the more powerful question. Because how we be is impacting what we do. And if our doing isn't loving enough, that means our being ain't loving enough. This is race-based educational trauma right here. This is recent. This is October 31st. In my neck of the woods, down in, where am I from? Northern California. From Northern California. Milpitas High School, a teacher came to school on Halloween in blackface to imitate the rapper Common. He talked about this with students before he did it. Guess what the students said? Don't do it. Don't do it. It won't be a good idea. But he's the adult. He knows best. He didn't listen to the 15-year-olds that told him not to do it. So one of his African-American young woman students sends out a tweet. So one of our white teachers at MHS yesterday decided to paint his face to look like Common the rapper yesterday. That's all she said. Right, I know. Breathe. Just breathe. Close down. Breathe. That yearbook right there from 1947 is from the high school that I started teaching at in 1994, where it was Colonel Reb and the Rebels. And Colonel Reb was a plantation owner. And in 1994, when I was student teaching there in 1993, I would go to the football games. And at the beginning of every football game, they ran the Confederate flag up and down the field. 1993 and 94. My principal cared enough to simply allow me, the 22-year-old African-American young new teacher, who said, this doesn't feel good. That's not right. He didn't defend it. He didn't deflect it. He didn't have a curriculum council meeting about it. He didn't go to strategic planning meeting about it. He didn't even create an equity plan. He just stopped it. He talked to the athletic director. He just stopped it. That's the power we do hold. We can just make a choice. We don't really need permission to be great or need permission to do the right thing. I went back to that high school as principal in 2012. I left it in 2016. And in 2016, my major equity offering to that school was dismantling the mascot as Colonel Reb. People were very upset. I won't digress. I'm going to keep this part really short because we're over time. But I want people to have really strong, and I want to go strong, so we're not going to get to go that deep. I want people to have a level of understanding about why it is that some of our African American students, families, and educators are in such pain around our educational system and why we're getting some of the results that we get. The flip side of that is that I know that our white educators are in pain as well about our educational system and the results that we are getting. In the book, I talk about my big epiphany of healing for myself and changing how I be and how I show up was when I had an awakening of compassion towards my white teachers and white colleagues. When I realized how painful it must be to come to work and not get good results. To come to work doing what you love, busting your butt every day, working hard, trying to think it and figure it out. How can I get these kids to learn? And the data sucks. Anyway, in spite of your best efforts. And so we take shame in there, and the shame makes us want to blame. But it's not the kids' fault. It's not the family's fault. We are in charge. So we have these spheres of racialization of educational trauma. Slavery, it's illegal to educate enslaved Africans. That's trauma. Then we go into Jim Crow. Okay, Jim Crow, segregation of schools, then desegregation, we're busing students of color, more trauma. Then the individual piece, the implicit bias and discrimination, more trauma. All this trauma at every level over several decades, hundreds of years, with no time to heal in between. No time to heal. None. Historical outcomes after Brown versus Board of Education, after some decisions were made to try to make things right. But it happened. When reading becomes punitive and slaves and African Americans are whipped, the message is education is not safe. When now we have mandatory segregation, so we're going to let you all learn and read now, but by the way, you're not worthy enough as the others to get what they get. That's that message. Then we have Brown versus Board of Education. We're going to let you come to school with us now, but oh, guess what? We're going to have state aggressively mandated aggression towards you just to be able to learn and have the same opportunities as everybody else. Then the amount of bias that's against our students, our families, even the educators. You don't know how hard it is to be an African American leader in our school system. To grow up as a black child into a black adult, understanding our culture, understanding what our kids need, and beg you to think that we're right. Beg people to listen to us about what we know our kids need. That's how strong the bias is, y'all. To be absent from curriculum, maybe a little extra in February, that's a maybe. And then to be out with all this achievement gap data. Message, education is not for you. So that's some of the unconscious and conscious messaging that is happening, which is why we need our healing, because we have to undo this both societally and educationally. And if we remember about the 3 brain states of learning, we have to know that we have to feel safe, then we need connection, then I can learn. But I just showed you all the lack of safety. I just showed you all the lack of connection. But I want you to trust me and let me teach you anyway. Good try. And so our being impacts our doing. Our being impacts our doing. So when we're looking at our overall academic data, when we're looking at our overall culture and climate data, and we sit there and say, yeah, you know, our school has at-risk kids, our school has hard-to-serve populations. I want you to think about hard to serve and think about how that's code for not like me. Because the other kids aren't hard to serve. I didn't have an achievement gap with African American students. My master teacher, my mentor teacher when I was in teacher school and beyond, white woman. Best teacher who poured into me ever in high school, white woman. It can be done when we do our work. So I want to make that equivocally clear. The skin isn't getting in the way. This is getting in the way. Less this, more this. Because our current strategies are futile unless we engage in the hard work. Period. And all the studies show for trauma, SEL, everything, the research shows resilience and a caring adult, and I'm going to underscore, needs to be a skillful, caring adult, which means we have to do our work. We have a few minutes left. I'm going to skip over some things because I want us to really end from a place of connection and healing. And it's okay, breathe through the parts that we're missing. It's all right. I'm going to ask you to simply get to the place where we can have a paradigm shift. By the end of where we are in this conference, when we're embracing liminal space, the paradigm shift, I'm not responsible for those 2 questions, someone else created them, but moving trauma-informed from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And on top of that, because of what happened to you, what kind of support do you need? The questions in the yellow box are from a school district I'm working with, and they're beautiful questions that they're living into. The possibility of, who are we serving? Who aren't we serving? And how do we know? I love those questions. When we live in a space of curiosity around this, instead of judgment, blame, or shame, we ask the right questions. And how can we teach what we do not embody? And we're born to love. We embody love, and we need to live that embodiment. So, what is the question or possibility that you're living into at this COSM conference experience? What will it be for you? How will you embrace your healing? How will you go into the different spaces here and not just be like, what can I get? What can I get? Take back. No, what can I just absorb and receive? Let that simmer and then take it back. Because if nothing shifts in here, 20 strategies ain't gonna shift. So let us sit for a moment, have a mindful moment together. I'm going to take you on a little journey of this before we break to go. I'll ring the bell when we're done. So just simply be in a space of closed eyes, meditation posture, and enjoy receiving. Just take 3 deep breaths, anchor yourself. Bring your breathing down into your stomach. And just allow. May the light of our healing, your flame meeting mine, mine meeting yours. May our flames joined together bring us peace. May our flames joined together renew the places that we share and strengthen the light that shines within each of us, through us all. May we let the light of our love shine. May we allow self-transformation for school transformation. I'm going to ring the bell, and when you can no longer hear the bell, please open your eyes. Welcome to the coalition.
just mindfully move to our first session. And we'll meet back at the resource fair at the very end to celebrate all you've learned and connect with the new people that you're meeting. If you have any questions, find somebody with a Cosmo t-shirt on and we'll get you the answers. I've got no words right now, so have a wonderful day.